Ayani stepped off the bus, the humid Jamaican air instantly clinging to her skin like a second layer. Kingston bustled around her, a kaleidoscope of vibrant colors, loud music, and the enticing aroma of jerk chicken. She adjusted the strap of her backpack, a nervous flutter in her stomach. This was it. Her new life at the University of the West Indies, and more specifically, her new home, the historic Belmont Dormitory. Belmont Dorm was a relic of a bygone era, a grand but slightly dilapidated structure set back from the main campus. Its weathered stone walls were draped in climbing vines, and the tall arched windows seemed to peer out with knowing eyes. Local legends whispered that Belmont was more than just a dormitory, it was a place where the veil between worlds thinned, a haven for restless spirits. Ayani, a shy and bookish soul from a small village, had always been drawn to the supernatural, though she had never truly believed in it. Now, standing before this imposing building, a shiver ran down her spine. The dormitory matron, a stern but kindly woman named Mrs. Davis, greeted Ayani with a warm smile and a key to her room. "Welcome to Belmont, dear. I hope you'll find it comfortable." There was a slight hesitation in her voice, a veiled warning that Ayani couldn't quite decipher. Room 302 was on the top floor, overlooking the sprawling campus. As Ayani pushed open the creaky door, she was met with a musty smell and an undeniable feeling of being watched. The room was sparsely furnished, with a single bed, a worn desk, and a wardrobe that looked older than she was. Despite the unsettling atmosphere, Ayani felt a strange pull to the place, an undeniable sense of belonging. This was her chance to reinvent herself, to break free from her timid shell and embrace the unknown. As she began to unpack, a sudden gust of wind rattled the window pane, and a faint whisper seemed to echo through the room. Ayani paused, her heart pounding in her chest. Was it just her imagination, or was Belmont already revealing its secrets? That night, sleep came quickly, but it was far from restful. Ayani found herself standing in a moonlit clearing, surrounded by towering trees draped with Spanish moss. The air was thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine, and a haunting melody drifted through the darkness. It was a place both beautiful and unsettling, like a scene from a forgotten fairy tale. Then she saw him. A man stood in the center of the clearing, his features partially obscured by the shadows. He was tall and slender, with piercing eyes that seemed to glow in the moonlight. His clothes were old-fashioned, a tailored coat and trousers that spoke of a different era. There was an air of melancholy about him, a deep sadness that resonated within Ayani's soul. He looked familiar, as if she'd known him in another life. He reached out to her, his hand outstretched in invitation. Ayani hesitated, drawn to him but also wary of the dreamlike setting. As she took a step forward, a voice echoed through the clearing, whispering her name. It was both comforting and terrifying, as if it came from the very earth beneath her feet. "Ayani," the voice murmured, "beware the shadows they seek to bind." The man in the clearing frowned, his expression darkening. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Suddenly, the clearing began to dissolve, the trees fading into mist and the moon growing dim. Ayani felt herself falling, tumbling through a vortex of darkness until she was jolted awake. She sat up in bed, her heart racing and her skin clammy with sweat. The dream was so vivid, so real, that it felt like more than just a figment of her imagination. Who was the man in the clearing, and what did the warning mean? As she lay there in the darkness, the faint scent of jasmine lingered in the air, a haunting reminder of the dream and the mysteries that awaited her at Belmont Dorm. The next morning, Ayani couldn't shake the memory of the dream. The man's face, his melancholic eyes, were etched in her mind. She tried to focus on her classes, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the moonlit clearing and the whispered warning. There was a lingering presence in her waking hours, a sense of being watched that she couldn't ignore. It was as if the dream had opened a door to another realm, and something had slipped through. Determined to understand the dream, Ayani visited the university library. She spent hours poring over books on Jamaican folklore, local legends, and the history of Belmont Dorm. She learned about Duppys, the spirits of the dead who roam the earth, often trapped between worlds. Some were benevolent, offering guidance and protection, while others were malevolent, seeking to cause mischief and harm. The more she read, the more convinced she became that the man in her dream was a Duppy, and that his presence was somehow connected to Belmont. She discovered that Belmont Dorm had been built on the site of an old plantation, a place where countless slaves had suffered and died. There were rumors of secret tunnels, hidden chambers, and restless spirits that haunted the building's halls. Some believed that Belmont was cursed, a place where the past refused to stay buried. One particular story caught her attention, a tale of a young plantation owner named Edward who had fallen in love with a slave girl named Amelia. Their love was forbidden, and their tragic fate had left a lingering stain on the land. Edward was said to have been murdered by his own family, his spirit forever bound to the plantation. As Ayani read the story, a chill ran down her spine. The description of Edward bore a striking resemblance to the man in her dream. Could it be that he was the Duppy who haunted Belmont Dorm, and that she was somehow connected to his tragic past? The more she learned, the more she realized that her arrival at Belmont was no accident, and that she was destined to play a role in the dormitory's haunted history. Night after night, Ayani returned to the moonlit clearing in her dreams. The man who she now knew was Edward awaited her, his eyes filled with a mixture of longing and sorrow. Their connection deepened with each encounter, and they began to communicate, their words weaving together like a delicate tapestry. Edward told her about his life on the plantation, his forbidden love for Amelia, and the circumstances of his death. He revealed that he had been betrayed by his own family, who had murdered him to prevent him from marrying Amelia. His spirit was trapped between worlds, unable to find peace because of the injustice he had suffered. He was tied to Belmont, a prisoner of his own tragic past. Ayani listened intently, her heart aching for his pain. She felt a deep sense of empathy for Edward, a connection that transcended time and space. She learned that he was not a malevolent Duppy, but a gentle soul who longed for freedom and justice. He was a victim of circumstance, a prisoner of the darkness that clung to Belmont. As their connection grew stronger, Ayani began to experience strange occurrences in her waking hours. Objects would move on their own, whispers would echo in the empty halls, and the temperature would suddenly drop. She knew that Edward's presence was growing stronger, and that their relationship was attracting unwanted attention. The darkness that bound him was stirring, and it was beginning to seep into her world. Despite the warnings, Ayani found herself falling in love with Edward. Their love was forbidden, unconventional, and perhaps even dangerous, but it was also undeniable. It was a love that defied the boundaries between the living and the dead, a connection that promised to change her life forever. But she knew deep down that their love would come at a price. Driven by both curiosity and concern, Ayani sought the counsel of Mama Essie, a renowned Obeah woman who lived on the outskirts of Kingston. Obeah was a traditional Jamaican religion, a blend of African spirituality and folk magic, often misunderstood and feared by outsiders. Mama Essie was a wise and enigmatic figure, known for her ability to communicate with the spirit world and to heal both physical and spiritual ailments. Ayani found Mama Essie's small hut nestled amidst a lush garden filled with herbs and medicinal plants. The air was thick with a scent of incense and the rhythmic sound of drums. Mama Essie greeted Ayani with knowing eyes, as if she already knew the reason for her visit. "You seek answers about the Duppy," she said, her voice raspy but gentle. "The one who haunts Belmont Dorm." Ayani was taken aback by Mama Essie's knowledge. She explained her dreams, her connection with Edward, and the growing darkness that surrounded him. Mama Essie listened intently, her expression growing increasingly grave. "The spirit world is not to be trifled with," she warned, "especially when darkness is involved. This Duppy is bound by forces beyond your understanding." She explained that the darkness that held Edward captive was a malevolent entity, a creature that fed on his energy and prevented him from finding peace. It was attracted to strong emotions, especially love and longing, and it would stop at nothing to keep Edward bound to Belmont. "This love you feel for him is dangerous, child," Mama Essie said. "It strengthens the darkness, and it puts you in danger." Mama Essie offered Ayani a protective amulet, a small pouch filled with herbs and stones that would ward off evil spirits. She also taught her a series of rituals and incantations that would help her protect herself from the darkness. But she made it clear that the only way to truly free Edward was to confront the entity that held him captive, a task that would require immense courage and sacrifice. Ayani left Mama Essie's hut with a heavy heart, knowing that she was walking a dangerous path but determined to help Edward find peace no matter the cost. Despite Mama Essie's warnings, Ayani couldn't bring herself to sever her connection with Edward. Their love had become her anchor, a source of strength and solace in a world that seemed increasingly hostile. She continued to meet him in her dreams, their bond growing stronger with each encounter. They shared stories, dreams, and secrets, their souls intertwined in a way that defied explanation. In her waking hours, Ayani found herself drawn to the places where Edward had once lived, wandering through the ruins of the old plantation, feeling his presence in the whispering winds. She learned more about his life, his hopes, and his dreams, and her love for him deepened. He was more than just a Duppy. He was a soulmate, a kindred spirit who understood her in a way that no one else ever had. But their love was not without its challenges. The darkness that surrounded Edward intensified, manifesting as paranormal events in Belmont Dorm. Doors would slam shut on their own, Shadows would flicker in the corners of her eyes, and the air would grow cold and heavy with an oppressive presence. Ayani knew that the malevolent entity was growing stronger and that it was targeting her, trying to break her spirit and sever her connection with Edward. Her fellow students began to notice the changes in her, the haunted look in her eyes, and the strange things that seemed to happen around her. Some whispered behind her back, calling her Duppy girl, while others avoided her altogether, fearing that she was cursed. Ayani felt increasingly isolated, torn between her love for Edward and the disapproval of the world around her. Despite the challenges, Ayani refused to give up on their love. She believed that their connection was worth fighting for, even if it meant facing the darkness that threatened to consume them both. She knew that she had to find a way to protect Edward, to free him from his torment, and to prove that their love could conquer even the darkest of forces. The paranormal activity at Belmont Dorm escalated, creating an atmosphere of fear and unease. Students reported seeing shadowy figures lurking in the hallways, hearing disembodied voices, and feeling cold spots in certain rooms. The dormitory matron, Mrs. Davis, grew increasingly concerned, but she dismissed the incidents as mere pranks or overactive imaginations. Ayani knew better. She understood that the darkness surrounding Edward was growing stronger and that it was feeding on the fear and anxiety of the residents. One night, Ayani was awakened by a blood-curdling scream. She rushed out of her room to find a group of students huddled together in the hallway, their faces pale with terror. They claimed to have seen a ghostly figure floating near the staircase, its eyes glowing with an unholy light. Ayani tried to reassure them, but she could feel the darkness closing in, suffocating the dormitory with its oppressive presence. The next day, a series of accidents plagued Belmont Dorm. A fire broke out in the kitchen, a student fell down the stairs, and a water pipe burst, flooding several rooms. Ayani realized that the malevolent entity was not just trying to scare them, it was actively trying to harm them. She knew that she had to do something to stop it before someone got seriously hurt. She consulted with Mama Izzy, who warned her that the entity was growing stronger and that it was becoming increasingly difficult to contain. She advised Ayani to perform a cleansing ritual, a traditional ceremony that would banish the evil spirits from Belmont Dorm. But she cautioned that the ritual would be dangerous and that it could attract the entity's attention, putting Ayani in even greater danger. Despite the risks, Ayani decided to proceed with the cleansing ritual. She gathered a group of students who believed in her and who were willing to help her. They prepared the necessary ingredients, lit candles, and began to chant the ancient incantations. As they chanted, the air grew thick with energy, and the shadows began to dance. The entity was not pleased, and it made its presence known. The cleansing ritual had an unexpected effect. It didn't banish the darkness from Belmont Dorm, but it did reveal its source. Ayani discovered that the malevolent entity was not a separate being but a manifestation of the collective pain and suffering that had been inflicted on the land throughout its history. It was the embodiment of the plantation's dark past, the legacy of slavery, violence, and injustice. The entity had latched onto Edward because he was the most vulnerable spirit in Belmont Dorm, a victim of betrayal and injustice. It fed on his pain and his longing, using him as a conduit to spread its darkness throughout the dormitory. Ayani realized that the only way to truly free Edward was to destroy the entity, to sever its connection to Belmont, and to heal the wounds of the past. But destroying the entity would not be easy. It was deeply ingrained in the fabric of Belmont, woven into the very stones of the building. It had been accumulating power for centuries, and it was now stronger than ever. Ayani knew that she couldn't defeat it alone. She needed help, not just from her fellow students, but also from Edward himself. She reached out to Edward in her dreams, explaining what she had learned and asking for his assistance. He was initially reluctant, fearing that his involvement would only make things worse. But Ayani convinced him that they had to fight, not just for their own sakes, but for the sake of all the spirits who were trapped in Belmont Dorm. Together, they devised a plan to confront the entity. Ayani would use her knowledge of Jamaican folklore and the Obeah woman's teachings to weaken the entity, while Edward would use his spiritual energy to sever its connection to Belmont. It was a risky plan, but it was their only hope. They knew that the confrontation would be dangerous, but they were willing to risk everything to free Belmont from the darkness that had haunted it for so long. The night of the confrontation arrived, and Belmont Dorm was shrouded in an eerie silence. Ayani, Edward, and a small group of students gathered in the main hall, armed with candles, herbs, and a fierce determination. They began to chant the ancient incantations, their voices echoing through the empty halls. The air grew thick with energy, and the shadows began to swirl. The malevolent entity made its presence known, manifesting as a swirling vortex of darkness that consumed the center of the hall. It lashed out with tendrils of shadow, trying to ensnare Ayani and her companions. But Ayani was prepared. She invoked the protective spirits of her ancestors, calling upon the power of the earth, the wind, and the water. She threw handfuls of herbs into the vortex, weakening its grip on the physical world. Edward, his spirit shimmering with ethereal light, stepped forward and unleashed a wave of energy that struck the entity with full force. The vortex shuddered, its form flickering and dissolving. The entity retaliated, focusing its energy on Ayani. It attacked her with visions of her deepest fears, trying to break her spirit and shatter her resolve. But Ayani refused to yield. She drew strength from her love for Edward, from her determination to protect Belmont, and from the support of her friends. She closed her eyes and focused on her inner strength, visualizing a bright light that banished the darkness. The battle raged on, the hall filled with swirling energy and the echoes of ancient incantations. Ayani and Edward fought side by side, their love and determination fueling their efforts. Slowly but surely, they began to gain the upper hand. The entity weakened, its form becoming increasingly fragmented. As the malevolent entity weakened, Ayani realized that she had a choice to make. She could banish the entity, driving it out of Belmont Dorm and freeing the building from its dark influence. But that would only be a temporary solution. The entity would eventually return, seeking to reclaim its territory and continue its reign of terror. The only way to truly destroy the entity was to sever its connection to the land, to heal the wounds of the past, and to create a new foundation of love and forgiveness. But that would require a sacrifice, a powerful act of selflessness that would break the cycle of violence and injustice. Ayani knew what she had to do. She turned to Edward, her eyes filled with tears. "I love you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I know that our love cannot exist in this world. The only way to free you is to destroy the entity, even if it means severing our connection." Edward understood. He knew that their love was a beacon of hope in a world of darkness, but he also knew that it was not enough to overcome the forces that held him captive. He nodded, his eyes filled with sorrow but also with acceptance. "Do what you must," he said. "I will always be with you in spirit." Ayani turned back to the entity, her heart filled with both love and resolve. She focused all of her energy on a single point, channeling her emotions, her memories, and her dreams. She unleashed a wave of pure, unadulterated love that struck the entity with the force of 1,000 suns. The entity screamed, its form dissolving into 1,000,000 fragments of light. The darkness vanished, replaced by a warm, golden glow that filled the hall. The pain and suffering that had haunted Belmont Dorm for centuries were finally gone, replaced by a sense of peace and tranquility. But the act of destroying the entity came at a price. As the darkness faded, so did Edward. His spirit shimmered, then slowly dissolved into the light, fading from her grasp. Ayani reached out, desperate to hold on to him, but he was gone. She was left alone in the hall, surrounded by the lingering warmth of his love and the bitter-sweet memory of their time together. Ayani had saved Belmont and freed Edward, but in doing so, she had lost the love of her life. She knew that she would never forget him and that his memory would forever guide her path. The Duppy's embrace had ended, but its legacy would endure, a testament to the power of love, sacrifice, and the enduring spirit of the human heart. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this journey into Caribbean culture, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating stories. We're planning our next video and would love your input. What stories or topics would you like to hear from us? Comment down below.